All right, Jose. So first of all, a tremendous shkayach, and thank you to Reb Chaim. Literally, again, he's given shir for the last 3 weeks, and Baruch Hashem, I've enjoyed them myself, listening to them. Reb Chaim, thank you on behalf of the entire shir. Thank you for keeping us going and keeping the dream of the Siyum alive in Miras Hashem, and definitely bringing us much closer to the finish line that I could have done in the last 3 weeks. So tremendous shkayach. But again, Chaim's my new inspiration. I decided less commentary, more Gemara. Let's go. So tonight we are beginning in Miras Hashem on Mem Tesama Beis 49b, and we are picking up at the 2 dots. Good. I'm sorry. You like this? we'll see. I have to say it. It's not going to be true, but whatever. Let's say 2 dots at Kamam Zamdim. So most remember again. So the Mishnah was talking about the idea about how much does one have to eat in order to go ahead and bench with a mezumin, bench with mezumin. So remember again, there was a machlokes over here. Is it a kizayis or is it a kibeya? Is it the size of an olive or is it the size of an egg? Now I'll say we're not getting into this now, and I mean Chaim covered it beforehand. So it's clear, by the way, when one looks at the Gemara, that the shiurim of the Gemara, right, the sizes of the olives and the eggs were clearly very different than what we have today. So again, we're not really going to delve much into that. There's a famous Noda Yehuda that goes through all the different shiurim. We see this all the time. But again, let's go weiter. Lememra, the Remeir chashav lekizayis Rabbi Yehuda v'kebeitza. So Rabbi Meir holds that halacha lemaisa. So again, Rabbi Meir holds that if you eat a kizayis of bread, you have a chiyuv of to bench, you have a chiyuv of mezumin. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's kebeitza, it's the size of an egg. Now, obviously, what are they arguing about? What they're arguing about is what is considered to be an important unit of food. How much does one have to eat in order to be considered to have consumed a unit of importance, and therefore, again, be obligated to go ahead and bench specifically with a mezumin? So again, Rabbi Meir holds kizayis, size of an olive. Rabbi Yehuda holds kibeitza, the size of an egg. Okay? But we heard just the opposite. Disnan. So this is a fascinating case. Imagine the following scenario. You leave Yerushalayim and you realize that you have sacrificial meat in your hand. So you realize you left Yerushalayim with sacrificial. Now again, remember, sacrificial meat can't be consumed outside of Yerushalayim. So what do you do if you realize you left Yerushalayim and you still have sacrificial meat in your hand? So again, at first glance you say, what should you do? Turn back around. But of course, what if you're far away? So watch this. He says as follows: Im avert sofim, sarfo bimkomo. If you already passed sofim. Now there's a machlokes what exactly sofim is. Is sofim an actual place? Is sofim the last place from where you could see Yerushalayim? So again, if you've already passed a certain point, in other words, if you're already too far out, ultimately, again, burn it where you are. Burn it where you are. In other words, you have to burn it because you can't do anything else with it outside of Yerushalayim. You can't eat it, so you burn it. However, but ultimately, again, if you're closer than that, then you have to go back to Yerushalayim and burn it in Yerushalayim. Burn it on the Mizbeach. The Gemara says it's fascinating. Ad kamahim chozim. So I say, so now watch this. Mem Tesama Beis 49b, last short line. So I say, listen to this case. And Kohanim, this is really very shayach. You're in Beis HaMikdash. You're in Beis HaMikdash, right? Halavai. Miratz and the Kohanim will be zocher to do this very soon. You're in Beis HaMikdash. You're eating karbanos. You leave. You go back home. You live, in Beit Shemesh. You're heading back. You realize, oh no, I took sacrificial meat with me. So again, what did the Gemara say? Essentially, the halacha is, if you're within a certain proximity, you have to go back to Yerushalayim and burn it by the Beis HaMikdash. Because also, once sacrificial meat has been removed from Yerushalayim, it can no longer be consumed. If you're further out, you just burn it in place. So here's the shaila. How much meat do you have to have taken with you in order to go ahead and have an obligation to return? Right? In other words, how much meat? So there's machlokas. Rabbi Meir Omer, zeh v'zeh kebeitza. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, zeh v'zeh bekizai. So Rabbi Meir says this and this. Now, by the way, I will say there's other case where this comes up. Where else does this come up? This is fascinating. Let's say you left home for Pesach. And you realize that you forgot to burn your chametz. So now, do you have to go back and burn your chametz? So the Gemara says, it depends. How much chametz did you leave over? So Rabbi Meir holds in both of these cases, karban and chametz, the shear is the size of an egg, kibeya. And Rabbi Yehuda holds the shear is a kizayis. Right? So in other words, just to illustrate this, according to Rabbi Meir, whether you left with a egg's volume size of sacrificial meat, you have to go back to Yerushalayim and burn it, or you left more than a egg's volume of chametz in your home, you have to go back and burn it. And Rabbi Yehuda agrees in principle with the concept, he just disagrees with the amount. He says it's a kizayis. So we'll say, what's the point for us? The point for us is that ultimately, again, this is different than the assigned opinions. Because beforehand, Rabbi Meir was saying kizayis, and Rabbi Yehuda was saying kibeitza. So what's going on over here? Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan says, not a big deal. They just got the opinions mixed up. And I was supposed to say, sometimes this happens, that halacha l'maisa, opinions get mixed up in the Gemara. Okay, Abaye lo tepoch. Abaye says, no, don't switch anything around. Hacha b'krai pligi. We'll say second one line, 49b. The Gemara says, in fact, over there's a machlokes in psukim. Listen, this is so interesting. Rabbi Meir Saber, this is great. V'yachalta, right, the pasuk says, v'yachalta zu achila. The pasuk says, it's talking about the pasuk by benching. So it says you eat. So what does v'yachalta mean? What does v'yachalta mean? You eat. V'savata zu shtia. V'savata means you drink. V'achila b'kizayis. And Meir says that halacha l'maisa, in halacha, the most basic unit of consumption is a kizayis. And therefore Meir understands that v'achalta v'savata, which is the pasuk by benching, tells you sometimes you have to bench for food you eat. Now, interestingly enough, sometimes you have to bench over what you drink. Now, when would you ever have a case of where you have to bench for what you drink? Again, or let's say a person is koveya suuda on wine. You could have a situation like this where, again, you establish your meal on wine. On wine. So it's such a concept like this. But the Torah tells us, and when do you have to bench? On the minimum unit of consumption. And what is the definition of the minimum unit of consumption? A kizayis. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda saw Rabbi Yachalta v'savata achila sheyesh ba svia ve'ezozu kibeitza. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no. The pasuk is a phrase. V'yachalta v'savata. What is v'yachalta v'savata? You shall eat and you shall be satiated. When, in other words, there's only an obligation to bench when there's satiety, when you're full. And how much does a person have to eat in order to be satiated? The Gemara says kibeitza. Rabbi Yehuda says the volume of an egg. So we'll say, so therefore again, when it comes to benching, this is interesting. When it comes to benching, the machlokes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is machlokes on how to darshan the pasuk. The pasuk by benching is v'achalta v'savata. Rabbi Meir says v'achalta means to eat, v'savata means to drink, and the minimum amount you have to eat in order to be chayv in benching is the minimum halachic. We'll call it the minimum meaningful halachic amount of consumption, and that's a kizayis. Rabbi Yehuda says no, v'achalta v'savata means when is there an obligation to bench? Only when you eat and you're satiated. How much do you have to eat and be satiated on the most basic level? Kibeitza, an egg's volume, incredible. On the other hand, hasam b'svara pligi. When it comes to the case of sacrificial meat removed from Yerushalayim, their machlokes is in svara and logic. Rabbi Meir savar chazarasa kitzumaso. Rabbi Meir says the obligation to return for sacrificial meat is for the same volume of tumah. How much sacrificial meat do you need in order to go ahead and contract tumah? Ma tumaso b'kebeitza, av chazarasa b'kebeitza. Sacrificial meat can only become tamei if halacha l'maisa. If halacha l'maisa, you have at least a kebeah, an egg's volume. So too, you only have to return to burn it if you have an egg's volume. Rabbi Yehuda savar chazaraso ki isuro. Rabbi Yehuda will say ultimately the obligation to return is like the volume of the isser. Ma isura b'kizayis, av chazaraso b'kizayis. Just like, again, the isser of let's say, again, inappropriate consumption of sacrificial meat is even on a kizayis, so too, again, you have to go back in a kizayis. So Rabbi says, so how do we paskin? So first of all, by benching, this is two important pieces of halacha. By benching, number one, we paskin, v'achalta v'savata means you have to eat and be satiated. So this is very interesting. I will say this is where in benching there's two halachas. There are times in life that you are chayiv mid'oraisa to bench, and there are times in life when you're chayiv midrabanan to bench. When are you chayiv mid'oraisa to bench? When you're full. V'yachalta v'savata. So if you eat and if you are satiated, and this is an important halacha to know. I don't know if I find 9 days, not the issue, it's the first day in, but milchik, it's very difficult to feel any level of svia. No? Just me? Okay, we had pizza. Okay, whatever. I digress. This is not the things that should be on our minds right now. Right? But lamaisa, doraisa, you have to bench when v'savata, when you are satiated. Midrabanan, when do you have to bench? Midrabanan, you bench ultimately again after you eat a kizayis of bread. So even if a person just eats a kizayis and then they don't eat anymore, you have to bench, but it's only drabanan. It's only drabanan. When you're full, you eat, you have to bench midoraisa. You'll say to yourself, who cares if it's doraisa or drabanan? You still have to bench. So we'll say, why does it matter? Why does it matter? What about in the following case? You finished your meal, you think you're benched, but you're not sure. You ever have that happen? right? It's not exactly one of those spiritual highlight moments, right? Right? It's kind of like, like one of those days where you're pretty sure you davened, but you're not exactly sure that you davened. But the good news is you look at your arm and you see a tefillin marks. Okay, they were there. Baruch Hashem. There's raglayim l'dav, right? There's proof. So sometimes a person benches, and unfortunately, because we're not always so medactic in our brachos, I don't remember. Did I bench or didn't I bench? So do you have to go back and bench again? So what's the answer? It depends, right? If a person ultimately again was satiated, so then ultimately again it's a suffix d'oraisa. In a suffix d'oraisa, you have to go l'chumrah. Whenever you have doubt in biblical law, you do stringently. You'll bench again. If you just kind of ate a kizayis of bread and that was it, and there was no sevia, there was no satiety, you would not go ahead and bench again. What's the halacha by Yerushalayim? It's such a schus Baruch Hashem to be able to learn a Gemara about the Beis Hamikdash during the 9 days. Like you spoke about on Shabbos, we only mourn in order to increase within ourselves an excitement for what we are going to have. So this is good to know by the Beis Hamikdash, right? Third Beis Hamikdash is going to be built Mihir Rabbi Amenu. We're going to have to bring a lot of karbanos. Different people for different reasons. Some people are going to have some chatas offerings to catch up on, right? Hopefully others some toda offerings to catch up on. So what do? I offer up halavai. Hopefully I'll only, right? I offer up a toda. I'm coming back out and I realize, I brought sacrificial meat out of Yerushalayim with me. So now let's say again, I'm still in close enough proximity. How much do I have to have with me in order to go back? The Rambam Paskins, a kizayis. A kizayis. If you have a kizayis of sacrificial meat, then the halacha is you have to go back to Yerushalayim in order to go ahead and burn it. Incredible. Mishnah. Okay, so there were a couple of people who mentioned, I'm not going to get to the Mishnah, but all right, fine. What am I naming this? Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows: Ketzad mizamnin b'shlosha. So Ketzad mizamnin. So we'll say, see now we're getting into the formulation of a mizuman. What's the formulation when you have a mizuman? Now we're going to see again, a mizuman of course is any group of three, but as we're going to see, it's not necessarily true that anything 3 and above is treated the same. So how do you do a mizuman? Ketzad mizamnin. Great Mishnah. B'shlosha omer nevarich. With three people, you say, Nevarich, let's bench. 3 people, well, again, we'll discuss where we get these numbers from, but 3 people is the most basic zimun unit, and the phraseology that is used is Nevarich, let us bench. B'shlosha v'hu, if there are 4 people, in other words, if there's 3 people in addition to me, then what's the halacha? Omer barchu. So we'll say, in this case, interestingly enough, so essentially you have your mezuman and you have a 4th guy. The 4th guy, we'll assume he's the guy leading the benching. He says to the group of 3, bless. See, hear this? If you're a mezuman, and so everybody is an integral part of the unit, use lashon of nevarich. Let's bless Hashem together. If you're 4, then again, one guy says to the other 3, baruchu. You bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All right, ba'asara omer nevarich Elokeinu. Again, if you have a minyan, 10 people benching, you add in Elokeinu, Hashem's name. Ba'asara, what if you have 11 people? Omer baruchu. Then ultimately, again, we'll see this theme over here, that if you have the unit plus another individual, the other individual essentially acts as almost as like the conductor of the group, and he instructs the group what to do. So if there's 3, it's nevarich. 4, so again, the 4th guy says to the other 3, baruchu. There's a minyan, Elokeinu. There's 11, so the 11th guy says to the 10, Baruchu le'Elokeinu. Gives the command. Okay? V'omer Baruchu. Achadasar v'achadasar yirvo. So the Gemara says as follows. It makes no difference whether you have 11 or whether you have 11,000. Okay, so we'll say, so we're going to see the Mishnah doesn't really read all that well, as we'll see in just a moment, because the Mishnah makes it sound like kind of once you get past 11, all numbers are the same. It doesn't matter how big your group is. The problem is the Mishnah contradicts that. Watch this. B'me'avahu. What happens, I will say, if I'm benching with a group of 100 people, right? B'me'ah, so 100 people. Hu omer nevarech Hashem Elokeinu. So we say nevarech Hashem Elokeinu. That's the phraseology. B'me'avahu, if there's 101 people, so let's say there's 100 people and I'm the 101st guy. So omer baruchu. So we'll say this is always the theme. Whenever you have the unit plus 1, so the plus 1 always gives almost like the command to the group to bench. Be'elef, what happens if you're benching with 1,000 people? Hu omer nevarech la'Hashem Elokeinu. So ultimately, again, you see nevarech la'Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei Yisrael. So you add in that Elokei Yisrael. Be'elefahu, what if there's 1,001 people? So the Gemara says, Omer Baruchu, ultimately again, so we'll say it's always the same theme. The plus 1 always gives the command to the rest of the group. Beribo, What about with 10,000 people? Can you imagine you're benching together with 10,000 people. Omer nevarich la'Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei Yisrael, Elokei Tzvakos, Yoshev Hakruvim ala mazon sha'achalnu. So now this is really getting into quite a heading for benching, right? So if you're benching with 1,000 people, so the leader of the group says, "Let us bless Hashem, our God, the God of Israel, the God of hosts, Yoshev Akrum, who sits with the cherubs for the food that we have eaten." Okay, what if you're benching with 10,000 and you're the plus one? So it's 10,001 people. You're the 10,000 the first person. Omer Baruchu. Ultimately, again, so once again, that plus one commands the rest of the group to bench. Ke'inyin shu mevarich kach onin acharov. Now, I will say, whatever the leader of the group, whatever phraseology he is using to lead benching, that's the same phrase that everyone uses to answer him back. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei Yisrael, Elokei Tzvakos, Yoshev Hakruvim, Ala Mazon Sha'achalnu. So the Mishnah just illustrates this with the 10,000 group formulation. Rabbi Yosef Lili says no. Rabbi Yosef Lili Omer Lefi Rov Hakal Hein Mevarchim. Rabbi Yossi, so we're going to see now, Rabbi Yossi is really the opinion quoted before. Rabbi Yossi says that the formulation for benching changes depending on the size of the group. The larger the group, the different the formulation. Where do we get this from? Shneimar, b'makelos baruchu Hashem mimkar Yisrael. Because literally the pasuk says, bless you, with the assemblies should you bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So again, based on this, Rabbi Yosef Lili says, the way you bless Hashem changes with the size of the group. We end off, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says as follows, Ma matzinu b'beis hakneses, echa merubim ve'echa mu'atim, omer baruch Hashem, bless you. So Rabbi Akiva says this is not true. Rabbi Akiva says when it comes to benching, there's one formulation. The same way in davening, right? There's one formulation. Also, right? You have a minyan. Whether you have a minyan of 10 people or you have a minyan of 10,000 people, when you get to Baruch Hu, how does Baruch Hu start? Baruch Hu as Hashem HaMevorach. And that's the same way you bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no matter how big or how small your crowd is. Therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, based on that, right? Echad merubim ve'echad mu'atim omer Baruch Hu as Hashem. So also Rabbi Akiva disagrees with everything, and Rabbi Yosef Lili specifically. Rabbi Akiva says there's a formulation for benching, just like there's a formulation for davening, and it is not number dependent. Rabbi Shmuel says, Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMevorach. Rabbi Shmuel says the formulation is Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMevorach. Now, what exactly Rabbi Shmuel is adding into the mix over here, Hashem will have to see. I will say, Shkoyach, we'll stop over here for tonight. So wonderful to be back with everyone. Again, tremendous Hashkach Tzar Chaim. Looking forward to a great week of learning together. Shkoyach, everyone.